Welcome to episode 25 of the Carnism Debunked podcast. Today's guest is Bryony, and we're going to be delving into some stuff I've never covered in any of my content before. And just a warning to any listeners before we proceed, this episode delves into dark topics such as hard drug use and addiction. 14 years ago, Bryony found herself injecting heroin into her foot in a nightclub toilet. Come 2024, and Bryony has turned her life around and is now a handstand and calisthenics coach, promoting the importance of a healthy lifestyle. Furthermore, Bryony is active for the animals and has done work over the years in the vegan community here in the West Country in England. So Bryony, thanks for coming on today to talk about such a dark and sensitive subject, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited.
Awesome. So tell us your story. How did you come into addiction? Tell us how that kind of works and what kind of place you were in your life when that all happened.
So I think like most teenagers, I was kind of dabbling in like alcohol and drugs, and it was nothing too serious at the start. But at some point there was a change in me where I finally got offered some drugs at the age of 15, and I believe it was possibly MDMA, but when it was all a bit dodgy back then. I mean, it always is, but who knows what was being cut with it? Because when I tell people what I was seeing, they said it sounds like it could have been cut with opium as well. So goodness knows what I was taking. I've really got no idea. But it was that really got me hooked, and I just kept going back for more. I just really couldn't stop. So I ended up sort of becoming that person that was like encouraging everyone else to do it. I wanted to be that person that was going the extra mile, that was the craziest out of all of my friends, because I always had a hard time fitting in at school and making friends. So I thought, if I stand out and I'm this like crazy girl at school doing loads of drugs, everyone's going to think I'm so cool and that they all want to hang out with me. And yeah, that's kind of like my thought pattern behind it, I guess, that it was maybe just rejection from not fitting in at school to wanting to be this out there, outgoing druggie as a teenager.
So you mentioned it was at school. Like, how old were you when this kind of happened?
Probably from 15, and then 16, I would say, like officially, like really into it. So just like coming out of school, but I wasn't attending school quite a lot because I just was always skiving and trying to get out of it. So I didn't come out with school with any qualifications or anything.
Yeah. And were there any sort of bad issues going on in your personal life that you think also made you resort to that kind of stuff and addiction? Or do you think it was just about stuff you had experienced at school and never feeling that you fit in?
What I think it was is I moved from Guernsey, from the Channel Islands when I was 13, and I got moved halfway through year 9. And I think it's a really like key time in any teenager's life to have sort of like a big change like that. So I lost all my friends, my comfort, like the island life was so cushy. Then we came here and it was just like a big scary world for me. And I was always like that new person because I was coming in halfway through after like the Easter holidays, and I had like big shoes, like my clothes looked weird, so everyone picked on me. So I think it was an element of that. Like, it was never horrible bullying. There's people with much worse stories in terms of that than me. But I think that definitely like instigated the thought of like, I'm going to prove all of you idiots wrong, and I'm going to be the cool one, and I'm going to take drugs, and you're going to look stupid.
Yeah. So how did you go from these kind of drugs like MDMA and I assume stuff like cocaine and weed and all that kind of stuff that pretty much all my listeners will have dabbled in to some extent? How do you go from that kind of stuff that you just go on taking at parties to the severe stuff like heroin? Like, what was kind of the gateway there, and how do you go from these party drugs to these kind of what we consider these life-ruining drugs like heroin?
Good question. Right. So I believe the real problem started when I was 18 and I met someone who was a well-known drug dealer in Bristol. I was living in Bristol at the time. And he just had access to everything, like anything you wanted. Money, celebrities. He was dealing to lots of like bands at the time. He would be backstage at, I don't even know the venue's name in Bristol anymore, but to all those places. So anything I wanted, I could have. So that's where I then got more into cocaine. And then I had a full-blown addiction with that. And I was even just so horrible, like obviously no one's particularly nice in cocaine, but I was so horrible and so spoilt, demanding more money, wanted more this, more that, a nicer flat. I was like just completely like self-obsessed. So he didn't actually give me the heroin when I came across it. It just got offered to me when I was in a nightclub, and I saw someone else injecting it into their foot. So I thought that's what you do, and
Right.
that's kind of where it ended up. I seem to be a bit of a copycat in lots of ways. I'm like, oh, she's doing it. That's cool. I'm going to do that.
And did you have any particularly dark experiences on heroin that you want to talk to us about? I mean, that's pretty dark. I'm not going to lie. Like
Yeah.
the fact that you end up doing something like that, but were there any kind of crazy nightmarish moments that you had on it that you look back and think, wow, I can't believe that this happened?
Yeah, that night in particular, I think I must have gone unconscious because I was on a whole cocktail of drugs. So it's hard to know like exactly what the heroin did to me because I was already on MDMA, cocaine, and some other pills, enough to probably like give me a heart attack, really. But from what I remember, I then wake up in some random guy's house. I have no idea where I am, no idea what's going on. I've been missing now for like 18 hours. And when I finally wake up and come back into my sort of reality of what's happened, I found out that all my friends have been calling the police. They've reported me as a missing person, and just no one really knew what happened. I don't even know what happened. And that kind of scared me enough in that moment because I thought, wow, all these people have been reporting that I'm missing. And what if it finally goes back to my family and then they find out that I'm missing and I'm doing all these things? Because I was hiding it quite well from them at that point, from what I think I was hiding it well anyway. Yeah.
To what extent do your family know about the fact that your addiction and that you were taking heroin and stuff at a young age?
They know now. They still don't know fully because I try and protect my dad a little bit, but he knows enough because I've been open about it in my journey, just so that people can feel like what I've gone through is relatable. And because often, like now, as being into fitness and using this as my profession, people are like, "Oh, you've always been really good," and I'm like, "No, I haven't. Like I've worked really hard for this." So I've always been open and honest about it. But yeah, they know a bit, but not too much. Maybe they'll know more after this.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie Trainspotting?
Remind me, what's it like?
It's a 1996 movie. Ewan McGregor is the main character. It's about a
Yeah.
group of heroin junkies in Edinburgh.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I have.
Yeah, it's a cult classic. Like it's one of those
Yeah.
movies you've got to watch. Because there's a quote from it. Because what I basically want to ask you, because not that I'm promoting that anyone does this or anything, but what I want to ask you is, what does heroin feel like? Because there's a quote in it that's something about like, take your best orgasm and multiply it by 10,000 and you're still not anywhere even near close. And I think I've only spoken to maybe one other person before who I've mentioned that quote to, who said that they've done heroin in their life.
Yeah.
They said they personally didn't agree with that quote in Trainspotting. But the movie very much makes it out to just be the most insanely euphoric drug ever that just doesn't compare to any feeling or experience that you could have in your life. So how would you personally, from what you remember, describe how heroin feels when you inject it?
In the very moment, from what I remember, you feel very warm. Everything's really good. You're like cozy. You could like just sink into the bed, and you're like, oh, this is incredible. That's from what I remember in those couple of minutes or moments that I had afterwards. Just like a really like sort of like nice tight sort of sensation. So I kind of get that quote, but maybe not to that extreme. But maybe I was already too far gone on lots of other things. So it's hard to say.
I'm not super clued up on drugs, but from what I know, heroin is basically the street version of morphine, right? Which we give to patients who are in severe pain. So it's kind of almost like this warming, hugging feeling, and would you say your troubles kind of just wash away in the moment and you kind of forget?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
There's, one of the scenes in Trainspotting, I guess, that quite artistically portrays that is he takes it and this is Ewan McGregor's character Renton, and he kind of just falls back into the floor, and the carpet just kind of comes up like that, and he gets rushed to hospital. But while he's getting rushed to hospital, you see it from his vision. And I don't know if you remember the scene, the sort of the floor rug carpet is kind of like around him in his field of vision as he gets taken to the hospital, just metaphorically kind of thing. So it's that, like, what you said then, I guess, kind of reminds me a bit of that scene. But is there anything else you can kind of compare it to for anyone who's just kind of very curious about how it feels? Is it kind of euphoric in the way that, I don't know, MDMA is, or is it just this kind of almost this reliever kind of thing?
It's definitely a reliever. I mean, like, another way you could describe it is like you're getting into like a warm bubble bath for the first time, and it's like so good. It's like you really needed it, and everything just relaxes. It's like your muscles are just like completely just chilled. That's like the closest thing that I could compare it to.
And when you were taking it, was there any, I guess technically you couldn't have had a massive fear because you were taking it, but was there any slight fear that you could be taking like infected needles or anything like that?
I mean, I probably was, but maybe I just got really lucky that night. Who knows?
Right.
But there was, I mean, I really didn't think about stuff like that back then. I remember taking, like, even on that same night, I'm pretty sure I bought some pills off a guy, and I literally like took it. He just put it out in his hand and like just gave it to me, and I dropped them all on the floor, and he looked at me and he went, "Pick it up." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I picked it up and on this grubby Lakota nightclub floor and ate them all. Like, that's just how little I cared about what I was doing. Or the thought of it makes me feel sick.
Right. Yeah, it reminds me of I saw this video meme. It was like me in my 20s taking a random pill a stranger has just given me in a nightclub, and just carefree sort of swallowing the pill, and it's like, now me in my 30s reading the back of like a Nurofen packet, like hoping I don't overdose or something like that.
That's literally me.
So after that experience at the nightclub, did you dabble in heroin again, or did you think never again after you kind of passed out and then woke up in a random house?
Yeah, no, after that was enough to scare me off. But I was taking MDMA that I'm pretty sure was cut with opium, because I was having very bizarre experiences, and I'm still not 100% sure, so I'm always curious to know what other people think that have gone down that route. But for example, I would have these posters of like my favorite bands back in my flat, and I didn't sleep for 3 or 4 days after taking I think I took a gram of MDMA one night, and they there was 3 guys in the poster, and they just like, they were all individually popping out the poster talking to me. It felt very, very dark.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that is an MDMA experience or not, because if I was taking it, then it was obviously very strong.
Well, yeah, MDMA can actually induce hallucinations, I guess, depending on who you are and the dosage you take. But maybe it was cut with. I don't know to what extent opium does that or anything. I know hardly anything about heroin, I guess. So I guess that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to get you on and ask you your story about this. But how easy is it to get heroin on the streets of the UK? Because I've always considered it to be something that you could probably only get if you knew some really, really dodgy people. And it might be just one person you knew or something. But is it easier than that to get? Could you just get, like, say someone wanted to just get some tonight, could they just get it?
I think so. I think it's very easy.
So so say you have a link to like a weed dealer or something like that, who might not sell it themselves. You could probably just through them be like, I want to score some heroin or something, and he would get a link like for you or whatever.
100%. I think it's much easier. In fact, I'm pretty sure I witnessed someone actually injecting it in their leg the other day in a phone box, and I was walking on the street.
Yeah, I mean, I assume. Yeah, I assume if someone's going to be doing that on the street, that's going to be a homeless person, and they do something. They often do have such contacts and stuff. But I'm just wondering, but I guess you say, is that easy that the average kind of man or woman living in their own house could get it if they just linked up
Yeah.
with their weed dealer and stuff, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Tell us about how you turned your life around and how you overcame all this kind of stuff, because it seemed like you were in a bad place when you were younger. And I guess the thing is, a lot of people, when they're resorting to heroin use and addiction to other drugs, they kind of stay stuck there. So how did you turn your life around?
So it was the end of 2012. So I had actually, sorry, I'll go back a little bit before that. I'd been still like holding a job down. I could still work really hard and turn up, but I was always a bit that mental person on the shift. And I was working in retail jobs, so you can get away with quite a lot of stuff there. But I wanted to get out of a retail job and find something different for some reason. And I came across working in a care home with children with quite severe sort of different needs that need to be looked after. So I think during that time, that was about 2012, I remember I was going out with this guy and I said, oh, I'm taking on this new job. I should try and be more responsible. Maybe I should stop doing drugs. And then we both looked at each other and we just laughed hysterically. And we're like, no, that's never going to happen. So there's that one sort of moment that I remember. But then towards the end of 2012, so I've been in this job for a couple of months. Still, I'm probably taking a little bit less, and I'm definitely not doing it on shift at this point. I'm like, it's been pushed more to like just the evenings or the weekends. So I think there was a slight natural progression in terms of that. But end of 2012, my mum gets diagnosed with bowel cancer, stage 4. And it was just obviously a real shock, like no one was expecting it. And then it was about a couple of months of me still continuing on the same way. And she went through her chemotherapy, and then sort of they said, it's a miracle, she's going to be fine, it's all good. And then that didn't last for very long. So a couple of months later, she then passed away. So we watched her kind of just like look like she was dying over like the next 3 or 4 months. So then we're sort of in like July 2013. During that time when I knew she was going to pass away, I just felt more, again, like sort of a natural pull to like stop taking as many drugs, but I was still doing it. But now I had this guilt inside of me where I felt like this just feels wrong. Like I should be looking after my family. I should be trying to get to know my mum more before she passed away. And then when she finally passed away, July 2013, it was about a week or so later, I was sat with my niece. So I'm 24 at this point, and my niece is 13. And she said, she just out of the blue was just sat there together. She goes, I can't believe that people take drugs and drink and abuse their bodies. And Nana just passed away and she was so pure in her body. And it woke me up. It was like literally, I feel like a light bulb moment happened in my brain. And I just went, I'm done. And that was it. And yeah, that was just sort of my moment.
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of ironic because it took another dark moment in your life to actually come out of that darkness, if that makes sense. It's strange as well because what they told you about your mum and her cancer, bowel cancer is, from what I understand, pretty much a death sentence. Like every person I've ever known who's had bowel cancer, that was it. It's just like they're going to die in the next 2 months or something like that. It always seems to be one of those ones that it's like you just know that it's going to happen next. And you're saying that there was almost this false sense of hope, like the hospital had told you guys it's going to be all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, that was obviously a deeply traumatic experience in itself. And do you think that you sort of turning your life around then, is it almost in homage to your mother who sadly passed away? Is it like a way of saying, I'm sorry that I went through this stage, and I want to live the rest of my life how you'd have wanted me to live it? Is that something to do with it as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I definitely had more of that in my mind at the start. But I like now, sort of 10.5 years later, and I have to go back and remind myself of that as well. Just be like, this is why I'm doing it. Like when I have days where I struggle with my business, or I'm like, oh, why am I doing this job? Or Like I do have to go back and like think this, it's because I want to make an impact to help other people feel really good as well.
Yeah. Now, do you listen to that podcast by our favorite ex-vegan fool, Cosmic Skeptic?
Who's that?
If you don't know him, you don't know him. But
I know a lot
basically,
of ex-vegans, but I don't know who this is.
yeah, okay. So Cosmic Skeptic, or Alex O'Connor, he's a very well-known YouTuber in the UK, kind of an intellectual YouTuber. He's known in the philosophy spheres and the intellectual kind of spheres, that kind of thing. And he went quote unquote vegan a few years ago, and now he has, given up on the animals, as many of them do. He claimed he made some terrible excuse about he has IBS or something, even though there's thousands of vegans with IBS. So, but anyway, he does a very interesting podcast, and he had Peter Hitchens on recently, and he was kind of pressing Peter Hitchens about drug policy and legislation. It's a pretty hilarious episode if anyone wants to check it out. So do check it out for anyone listening, because Peter Hitchens ends up like storming off in the middle of the podcast just because he presses him on his beliefs about drugs staying illegal. Because I think Alex O'Connor himself, Cosmic Skeptic, is probably like many young people, actually more open to the idea of legalizing drugs and actually being under the belief that that could possibly be safer. So I wanted to get your opinions on this now, as someone who was in a really dark place with drugs when they were younger. What is your idea? Like, what is your belief now on drug policy and legislation? Do you have any strong beliefs on that?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. I haven't thought about it for a long time, but there was a period when I gave it a lot of thought, and I was saying maybe out loud to a very small selection of people, like, I just think alcohol and drugs should be non-existent and just banned if that is a possibility. But yeah, I know that's a quite extreme thought. Especially a lot of people don't associate alcohol as a drug, but there's alcoholics, there's people dying from alcohol abuse, alcohol overdose, those kind of things. So I class alcohol as a drug as well.
Absolutely.
As
You
it
don't
should be.
class it as one. It objectively is one, right? It just
Yeah,
is.
it is. So yeah, and people say everything in moderation. I'm like, well, people can't do crack in moderation, so I don't know, where's the line?
So, all right. So let me try and press you on this a little bit, because this is
Okay.
interesting, because you're being consistent. That's great. But you're being consistent the other way than is the way that many people do. So what people usually say is, well, you're right, Bryony, alcohol is a drug. It's just, it's no different from taking cocaine or something. It's a drug. Like, you can wreck people's lives. Like, if you look at the graphs and the charts and stuff, it shows that alcohol is one of the leading causes of, violence and this, and people ruining their lives and stuff in the UK, whatever it is. So I think due to alcohol being legal, we might as well legalize all drugs and regulate them and have them safer. So instead of going to these dodgy backstreet dealers and stuff, you're actually getting your cocaine or MDMA, whatever it is, from a pharmacy. It's got the specified dosage. It's got warning, do not take if you have this, do not take if you have that. And we basically legalize and regulate it in the same way that we do alcohol. So it's not in the hands of dodgy backstreet dealers, and we're not going down alleyways to get our moonshine on a Friday night and then dying of an alcohol overdose, whatever. Now you're going, from what I gather, technically the other way. So you're saying, ban them all. Do you see a problem? Do you think that there could be more problems if you make them all illegal, including alcohol?
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I guess that's just me, and my ideal world is just not to have it at all. But I
Yeah.
totally get where you're coming from, what you're saying, that it's not, that is also maybe an impossibility. So maybe it should be legalized, but yeah, I guess we don't know till we try, do we?
Yeah, well, I think I don't know exactly how this works, but I think some countries have is it Portugal might have now legalized hard drugs? But I don't know exactly how it works. and to what extent. Yeah, I don't really understand, I guess, how it works. How you would get them, whether it's just like a possession thing that they've legalized. But I could be totally wrong on this. Like I maybe I have a wrong opinion about this, and perhaps my view is more harmful. But I guess I've held the belief maybe since I was in my, say, early 20s, that we should maybe just legalize all drugs and regulate them in the way we do alcohol. My opinion on alcohol even is, yeah, it's bad. There's nothing really good about alcohol, right? He says, sipping a glass of whiskey as he's got you on this podcast. But at the same time, I think the country would be worse if alcohol was illegal and people instead were going to backstreet dealers like they do heroin and stuff to get alcohol. And I think that could be more dangerous. I think now that drugs are in our society, maybe it's better that we actually just legalize them all as a consistency thing. Because you're right, it is inconsistent that alcohol is legal, cocaine is not legal, MDMA is not legal.
Yeah, and I think that's where my problem lies with it. And like, and obviously I can be swayed either way. I'm not like totally stuck on it. Like everything has to be banned. Like there is no such thing as an ideal world, is there? So we have to make the best of what we've got. But yeah, you're right. Like, why is alcohol legal and other stuff is illegal? That's strange. And you made a good point as well about the violence thing, and that goes into homes, domestic violence, animal violence. Like it's very prominent there with alcohol.
Yeah, it is a tough one, I guess, because when I guess something has kind of infected I guess our society in such a way, it's one of those things where it's like, do we just accept that we now have this problem and actually try and regulate it and make it safer? Or is that actually, would that in some way exacerbate the problem? Like, what do you think about, do you think if perhaps cocaine was legalized tomorrow, do you think more people would, do you think people would go, yes, it's legal? I've never done cocaine before. I've never had an interest in taking cocaine, but because it's now legal, I'm going to go to the pharmacy and get myself some cocaine. Or do you think the people who just wouldn't want it just wouldn't take it?
I don't know. I would like, maybe this is too optimistic, but I'd like to think that now in this day and age that we're in, that people are more clued up and have more knowledge to not go and do that. But I know that that's probably quite a naive answer as well.
Well, no, it might not be, because I guess the arguments on the pro legislation side would be what you've said there. They would say, look, people who don't want to take cocaine aren't going to just take it because it's been legal. It's just the people who do take it will now be taking it instead of from, Shady Dave, the backstreet dealer who's cutting it with God knows what. They're going to the pharmacy or wherever to get it, and it's in like a prescription dose or whatever it is, and it has warning instructions on the packet. What was the other thing I was going to ask? Are you teetotal now then? Do you not drink or anything?
Yeah, no, I don't do anything. 10, just over 10 years, like clean and sober. So I don't touch anything. I think because it had such an impact in my life, and I've seen it with people close to me and not close to me, like have such an impact. That's why I just hold that view. It's just a view, not like I'm dead set on it. So like I'm totally changeable and stuff like that. But like, why take it if like we know there's so much damage that can be done?
Do you still go to parties and stuff like that where people are drinking or doing drugs around you?
Not really, but just because I don't really get invited to stuff like that.
we're boomers now.
Rejection. I'm going to go and get high again.
How old are you now, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 34.
You're exactly the same age as me and Rachel then. So that's interesting. The boomer early 30s crew here. Yeah, you're right. It's just few and far between now that you get invited to these things at that age, right? I can attest to that as well. I just wanted to make a further point on the legislation thing. Just a little analogy that might change your mind somewhat if you are indeed in the make it illegal camp. We do sell technically, hardish kind of dangerous drugs in shops already. We have glue, and we have butane gas. You know, I could just go down the shop now and buy a butane gas canister, for example. Does the fact that I'm not going down the shop now and sniffing glue or taking butane gas, does that somewhat sway you more to the legislation side, to things like cocaine and MDMA and stuff? Or do you still think, no, it could be better that it's all illegal?
No, I think that could sway me for sure. Yeah. But
Yeah.
like it's just such a hard one because I feel sometimes I'm like, yeah, sometimes I'm like, definitely get rid of it all. What's it doing on this planet? We should just be focusing on being pure in our bodies and healthy and all this stuff. But equally, I totally get that, you know, that's not reality. But I do think maybe it's in different cultures as well. Like you tend to see maybe in somewhere like France or Italy, like there's less of an alcohol problem there. But perhaps, I don't know if that's particularly a true stat, but just as an example, because they are better at moderation. But maybe it's the British culture that we're in where it's pretty rife here.
Yeah, I think there are definitely some cultural stuff. Like, you know, I've got mates who have come back from like Spain or Italy and stuff because they've got family there. And, you know, my British mate will be cracking openly, you know, the vodka at 8 p.m. and saying, right, let's get on the pre-lash or something, lads, or whatever. And everyone, they'll be like, oh, what are you doing? What's this? And he'll be like, you know, you get tanked up as much as you can before you get in the club. So then it's the cheaper rest of the night. And they're like, what are you talking about? Why would you just intentionally try and get drunk, kind of thing? Like in other cultures, like in places, I think like Spain, for example, it's more like this kind of, you kind of drink as like this kind of social kind of thing. It's just like you might have a cocktail or two with your mates and you stay out really late, whatever, but it's all just about the conversation and stuff. Whereas in places like Britain and Ireland and maybe the States as well, even though their drinking age is higher there, it's all about, when you're young, it's about who can get the most drunk possible without throwing up. It's almost like this competition with your mates. And it's like you have to ingest the maximum amount of alcohol possible. And you always end up, don't you, when you're like 25, 26, you know your exact limit. And it's like, yes, I'm my exact bit now where if I have one more drink, that's it. But yes, it's now pretty much a free night for me for the rest of the night. All I've got to pay for now is the taxi home.
So true. And that's why it's hard, like different cultures, because my part, like, you know, to compare, because I definitely think some are better than the Brits. And maybe it feels more prevalent to me here because of that reason. But my partner, who's from Romania, he said when he came to England a few years ago and he saw drunk lads out on the street, he was shocked. He couldn't believe their behavior, how they were, how much they could drink.
Really?
Even like they looked more unhealthy over here.
That's interesting because I thought Eastern Europe was the same or worse than here when it comes to hard drink culture, but maybe it differs in Romania. Because the way I always viewed it was like, yeah, Britain, Ireland, maybe places like Germany as well. It's like, yeah, get as tanked up as possible. Then when you get to more the Mediterranean places like Spain and Italy, it's not really about that. But then when you get to places like Russia and Belarus and maybe Romania, it's the same as here or worse. Like, was I mistaken in thinking that then?
Well, I mean, Romania is so big. I didn't realize how big it was until I went there. So maybe it's just like the area that he's from. But maybe like more sort of outer skirts, like where it's a bit poorer. It could be. I think it could probably be more like that.
Yeah, because Romania is.
You talked about like the Mediterranean like areas. Maybe it's just because we don't have good weather, so all we've got is drinking.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, isn't it? And yeah, I was going to say Romania doesn't seem like it's like you mentioned, it almost seems like, I've never been, but just from what I hear from Romanians I know and stuff, it almost seems a bit disjointed once you're there. It's like there's different cultures in different regions and it's not like they're all connected with each other. It's like you could be in like a city somewhere and the culture is completely different. And then you might be out in the countryside and they don't even have phones there or something. And there's almost like no contact with the rest of the country. They're like in their little microcosms there. So it could have completely different cultural microcosms there, so to speak. Whereas in the UK, it's very much, we're almost a bit of a homogenous culture, aren't we? Like,
I think so, yeah.
They might have chips and gravy up north, but we know about it, and it's not like this super crazy thing. But we just have these very slight regional differences. But let's talk about this kind of stuff you do now then. So you say on your Instagram profile that you're a calisthenics and handstand coach. Now, people might be listening and thinking, what on earth is that? So tell us about what both of those things are.
Yeah, so, well, after I kind of got clean and sober and I had that light bulb moment go off, started getting into fitness. So I started trying to run and like raise money for the hospice when my mum passed away. So that kind of triggered the fitness thing. And then I ended up doing a qualification to become a personal trainer because I just saw an advert in this gym that I was going to. So I was doing like the regular weight training, going to like body pump classes and spin classes and all that kind of stuff. And then got a job in a local gym in Bath when I moved back over here, and I just found this pull-up bar and I started hanging off it. I couldn't do any pull-ups, but I just wanted to like hang upside down next. I thought, oh, that's quite fun. I used to do that as a child, and I don't know. I think I just became like this weird person that just hung upside down this pull-up bar, and no one really knew what to do with me in this gym. So after I'd done that, sort of maxed out on boredom of that, I don't know what happened, but maybe I came across the word like calisthenics, and I Googled it, and I found this girl on YouTube about 7 years ago, and she was flipping herself around a bar, and I'm like, she is so cool. I wanted to be just like her. She was like in really good shape, like muscly, tanned, doing like crazy cool stuff, and she was stronger than anyone else lifting weights. And I just thought, I want that. So I started to look up a calisthenics coach near me, and I couldn't find anyone for ages, but I finally came across this guy. His Instagram name is Coach Quinny. So I booked some sessions with him, and I couldn't hang upside down on my own. I had to get him to like help me get upside down and like go on the gymnast rings and do all these sorts of like interesting moves and shapes and like get pull-ups. But I was like super weak at the start, but I thought I was really strong because I'd been weight training for a couple of years. But the rings like really humbled me because finally I had to like use my body weight against the instability of this like hooped shaped thing hanging from the air. So I kind of started the calisthenics journey with that. But then I started seeing him do handstands, and I thought, I want to do that next. So then I got into handstands. And first of all, I was just throwing myself against the wall. And then finally realized it's really technical, and it's not just, you can just do it because you did it as a kid. Like people in the circus train it professionally, and, you know, there's so many layers and elements to handstands. So I just kind of developed my own practice with it. And then somehow, I don't even know how it happened. It was all kind of a natural cycle, but I just started, the more I did it and the more I was showing it off on Instagram, the more people wanted to learn from me. So I just started like teaching people one-on-one, and then I decided to launch my own handstand class a few years ago. And now my handstand classes online are my busiest classes of the week. And sometimes I laugh at myself that I'm teaching people how to stand on their hands and that people are paying me for it. Like it's kind of ridiculous.
And what are calisthenics? What does that even mean?
Calisthenics is like, I think it's described as like a raw version or like a street version of gymnastics. So obviously gymnastics is like very strict. You stick to like your lines, your moves and everything. But with calisthenics, you can freestyle that more. So you can flip yourself around bars. You don't need to follow particular rules. You could learn like muscle ups or like how to swing yourself around the bar forwards or backwards. It can just be a bit more raw and normal for like the everyday person. So you don't need to be a gymnast to necessarily do it. You can learn at any point.
So it's kind of like the gymnast version of parkour.
Yeah.
So exactly. when you go on people's calisthenics Instagram profiles and stuff, you usually see them like at parks and stuff, and they'll just be doing stuff on like the monkey bars or whatever it is. They'll just be doing these weird like exercises, whatever they are. So is it kind of like could it be described as like body weight training? So almost like
exactly.
So using your body to lift weights rather than actually using weights, and then it can improve your strength and conditioning and stuff in that way.
Like nothing else you can compare it to. That's what I loved about it. Like the power of like, especially as a female, like being able to do a pull up on your own and like thinking like how I can use this in other like functional ways, and just seeing like the strength and control and the muscle definition that you get. Like you can obviously still get that doing weights, but the difference with calisthenics versus weights for me personally is that not only do you get strong, but you become like more functionally strong and able to do things with your body that maybe you didn't think you could do before. Like you can turn in like weird directions, you can do you become more flexible and mobile because you're sort of forcing yourself into like these more contorted positions in some moves. So it's just interesting. She suddenly like open up this avenue of like, oh, my body can do some pretty cool stuff that I definitely didn't realize I could do before.
Now, here's a topic I bang on about quite a bit to people who know me, because there's not enough people doing it. So I think you'll agree with me on this, but can you advocate for the importance of exercise for mental health? Because I'm constantly going on Facebook and it's full of vegans talking about, oh, my life sucks and I hate everything and I want to die and blah, blah, blah. And not that I'm downplaying the struggles people are going through. These are real struggles, and feeling suicidal and stuff is a very real thing that we shouldn't undermine. But one thing that I think is very clear is that not enough people exercise, and this is a gateway to good mental health. Are you a firm advocate in believing that exercise is beneficial for mental health, and how beneficial do you think it is?
Absolutely. I think it should be like, if anyone's struggling with mental health, it should be the first thing that you seek to do. Like start moving your body, because it's just natural endorphins that you release afterwards. You'll start feeling good. And then you can keep like continuing on that journey. And if you still obviously need further help, then obviously go and seek professional help. But there's nothing like going to the gym, moving your body and starting to feel fit, whether it's working on weight loss or muscle growth or just flexibility. Like it can be anything, or just enjoying a sport that you like to do, if it's netball or something. Like you're just gonna feel so much better. And I think that's like the gateway to like other things that you can discover about yourself in like a mental health journey.
That's interesting. There's drugs in our own body. We release endorphins. We release these happy chemicals without us having to ingest anything, just us lifting a heavy weight and doing repetitions with it, or doing some push-ups, or going down the park and getting on the monkey bars and seeing, how far across them you can go without falling off, or hanging on something for as long as you want. Just doing these things release happy chemicals that you already have inside your own body. So, folks listening, please exercise for the sake of your mental health. And this, by the way, this isn't just two people waffling pseudoscience on a podcast. Like, this is just objective truth, right? That exercising releases endorphins, releases those happy chemicals. And we're not saying that, you do some exercise, it's just going to fix all your troubles and stuff like that. There's nothing that can literally do that. We're always going to have troubles in this life that we live. But, anyone who exercises regularly can attest, you will be much happier with that exercise than you will without it. In fact, I'm a firm believer that you can't be happy without exercise. Would you go as far as to say that if you don't exercise, you literally can't even live technically a happy life?
I genuinely can't fathom in my brain now how some people can go their whole lives without at least stretching or moving their body or going on a treadmill or something. I'm like, how can that be? Because that, you just don't know how good that can make you feel. And I find that really sad, actually, that some people will never bother to go to the gym or think I could feel really good about myself.
Yeah. And what about, I'm the worst person to speak on this at the moment because I love to eat some good old junk food. What about the importance of healthy eating for mental health? Do you think, or do you think actually we live a happier life when we're eating all these lovely foods that we enjoy eating? Or do you think there's like a little balance? What do you think of that?
I think a good balance. The main sort of rule in terms of like personal trainers coaching to their clients is that we generally say try and find like an 80-20 balance.
Right.
Like 80% good, 20% I would like bad in quotation marks, or just like chill out a bit. Maybe it's the weekends you want to chill out. But it really varies from person to person. Interestingly, I've had quite a lot of clients recently, and this is completely random, that have been ex-addicts. And for some reason, we sort of attract each other in this way without realizing. And they're the ones that are the most dedicated to their training, the ones that eat the best because they want to go all in, and they just take their health and fitness very seriously. And I find that really interesting because we've all talked about it sort of collectively together. We're like, what is it about us that makes us want to go the extra mile? But it's just that something in us, maybe.
A question on veganism now. Do you think that people who have faced hardship in their life are more likely to go vegan for the animals, which is the only reason to be vegan, by the way? But do you think people who have experienced hardship are more likely to be vegan than people who haven't?
I don't know. That's a tough question, actually. I don't know. I do know a lot of people, though, again, like ex-addicts that have gone into fitness and gone vegan, like similar stories to me.
Well, I think there is a case for it. So anecdotally, if you look across the vegan movement, it does seem to be rife with people who have had like really messed up experiences in their life, who've had like traumatic experiences or addiction or something like that. Sexual abuse and other forms of trauma. The movement seems to be rife with people who have had really bad experiences. And I think that when we've had bad experiences in life, we're more likely to empathize with the animals and think, I can put myself in their position. I've experienced hardship. I feel for the animals now because of the stuff that I've experienced. And I think there's a correlation there.
Yeah,
What do you think to that?
I definitely agree. When you put
Yeah.
it like that, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure, for sure. I think it's
absolutely.
that just ability to like look into their life and be like, I can like empathize in some
Yes.
degree, or like I feel bad for you, like this
Well,
could be better.
it flips the carnist myth, I think, on its head. The idea that vegans are privileged, or we don't have any issues going on in our lives, so we focus on these minor issues, like animals being mass murdered by the trillion every single year. The tiny minor issue that it is. But I think that completely flips that on its head. It's like, no, actually, if anything, it's you, mate, who's probably just lived your little privileged life and never really gone through anything, and that's why you're eating that steak on your plate now without a second thought. And the other thing is, the vegans, admittedly, and this is true as far as I can see from studies, we do have high rates of things like depression, anxiety, and stuff like that. And I saw someone being grilled about this on the show, and it was, I think, the carnist logic with this. It's like, well, this means then vegans that veganism is you're not getting the nutrients you want, and it's making you all depressed, and not omnivores, quote unquote, are more happy than you guys because we're getting all these nutrients, and eat red meat and you'll be happy, and blah blah blah. And the person clapped back and they said, no, it's actually, that's just correlation without causation, right? He said the likely reason that you see depression and stuff higher in the vegan movement is people who are more likely to be depressed, who are more susceptible to things like depression, are actually more likely to be predisposed to going vegan. And I think there's a reason for that. I think those of us who are kind of more, maybe emotionally aware, who are more sensitive to injustice, who actually see who are affected by things, people who are more likely to be affected by things. We're more likely to go vegan than those people who might not have depression or whatever it is, but just go through life just drifting like a stone in a stream, not really caring about anything. I mean,
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think the type of people who are more likely to get mental health issues, they're just more attuned to all the crap that's going on in this sucky world. We don't have this ridiculous rose-tinted optimism bias, which, by the way, I did have at one point. I remember before I was vegan, I was one of these people that's, good always triumphs over evil. And, in the Western world, it's all good and nothing bad happens. And evil, is just in these places like where there's war going on and stuff like that. And you take off those rose-tinted glasses as soon as you go vegan, don't you?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, I really think actually going vegan opened my eyes to so many other things, not just veganism, but just other issues going on in the world. And I just became generally more open-minded to other things. So that was very interesting.
With me, it's funny. It's almost flipped me the other way. So when that was true of me when I first went vegan, I think I became a more compassionate person generally. Now I've just gone full misanthrope because of the amount of time that I've gone vegan, and it's now like I care less about human issues as a result of being an animal rights activist. So it's kind of done the other thing to me. But what are some problems you see with the current vegan movement, animal rights movement, however you want to refer to it? Is there anything you think is kind of holding us back as a movement?
Oh, I feel like I was talking about this with someone the other day, and I'm trying to think of what it was that we was touching on, but it's a very good question. Maybe like the too healthy, 100% pure, clean eating, either extreme, I think, actually, to be honest. We could go either way with it. It could be like fully junk food vegans, fully 100% pure, can't touch a pinch of salt vegans.
Right.
I think that's why the balance is important, like an 80-20 rule or 70-30 or whatever you want to do with it. I think those people cause problems, and they make us, the ones in the middle being normal, look mental, and maybe that's what gives us a bit of a bad rep.
Yeah, see, I have a weird view on this when it comes to the dietary stuff. So I've heard some vegans say that it's every vegan's duty to be as healthy looking as possible to represent veganism well. Firstly, I don't subscribe to that because, number one, I think that kind of too much focuses on the fact that it's like a health kind of movement, when I want us to just be seen as normal people. It's not a diet, it's a justice movement.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if you don't have diversity of bodies with it inside the animal rights movement, it kind of it could also make it could also make the food kind of look crap as well. Not that that's the reason we should be selling veganism. It's not about the food, but I like the fact that we have fat vegans here and there who, you know, that it shows that we have delicious junk and stuff to eat. But I like the fact that we have a variety of bodies. We've got like huge, big gym going dudes who can like outlift like every single non-vegan, you know. We've got fat vegans who like junk food. We've got slim and athletic vegans. We've just got the normal vegan with a little, I don't know, little pot belly who works like an office job and just isn't that fussed about exercise. I like showing that we're just a diverse group of people. And in any case, if someone wants to say veganism is unhealthy or vegans can't outlift me or whatever, we've got all the people to prove them wrong on that anyway. We all know a vegan who can outlift any non-vegan or whatever it is, or like, you know, we've got athletes competing at the highest level in the Olympics and stuff. We don't need to all look like that, as long as we've got a good variety of vegans being like that. Like, I don't see the issue, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think as long as we're kind of away from like when everyone thought it was just like pale, skinny people that like were rotting away. I think as long as we're kind of away from that, then that's not a good image for us, is it? But I like normalization is obviously really important, and people that can relate to other people's bodies is very important to attract people to the lifestyle of being vegan.
Yeah, I hate that confirmation bias things carnists do, where, you know, if I'm a non-vegan, like I'm pale, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It's just I've grown up in a country with no sunlight and I'm white, right? So like I'm going to be pale. So, you know, when I'm a non-vegan, it's, oh, George, you have such clear, bright skin. And now I'm a vegan. Oh, you're pale. And then, you know, when I was non-vegan, it's George, you've got a nice, slim, athletic build like a football player. And now I'm a vegan. Oh, George, you're skinny and wasting away, whatever it is.
Oh, that's so true. That's painfully true. Yeah.
You can look literally exactly the same as a vegan or a non-vegan. And the carnists will, they will completely change how they view you, whatever it is, just based on whether they find out whether you're a vegan or not. So that's one of the crazy things.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more.
Coming to the end of the podcast, Bryony, now. So I guess I'll ask you one or two final questions. So the first would just be, what would your advice be to someone who was in a really dark place, such as yourself was, and has resorted to drugs? What would you say to those people?
I would say that you don't have to let it get to rock bottom to make a change in your life. I think I know often that is a case where people have to hit the lowest point of their life to make a change. But if you can get yourself out of that situation before you have to get to the worst point in your life, just start doing something simple for yourself every day. Just take yourself on a walk, have one healthier vegan meal every day. Maybe that'll make you feel better, feel your body. Just start moving your body, tuning into like better surroundings, whether that's like cutting people out of your life that aren't good for you, or scenarios that you're in. Like I stopped going to parties as soon as I decided to stop taking drugs, just because I knew that if I was around those people, I'd just instantly get drawn back in.
Right. And yeah, thank you for that. And we hope anyone who's listening who is in such a place can take inspiration from that. And I guess the final thing I'll just ask you is, did you want to shout out your business or anything? Do you want to, like, how can people get to you and get learning? So you teach both calisthenics and the handstand stuff. Like, how can people reach you?
Yeah, sure. So my Instagram's upside down vegan. It says what it does basically.
Yeah.
And actually, funnily enough, a few years ago when I changed my Instagram name to that, someone said, "You'll never get any clients when you call yourself vegan." And anyway, most of my clients now, I could say, are probably vegan or like interested in being vegan. So, haha, that person. But you can find me on Upside Down Vegan. And if you want to learn handstands, I teach 2 classes a week. I have a Patreon account where people can sign up. There's different membership levels that help people, on different budgets. So I make it very affordable for people. And my calisthenics stuff, I do it more in person. I teach in Bath at a calisthenics gym called Cali Unity. But I also teach on my Patreon handstands and flexibility. So once you start going into bodyweight stuff, you realize you probably need to stretch out as well. So that's kind of like the idea behind it. So I teach splits, back bends, and handstands online, and all my in-person stuff.
That's great. Everyone go and check it out. But yeah, thank you, Bryony, for coming on to the podcast today and for speaking about such a sensitive issue that many who were in your position want to talk about. And yeah, I hope it's been an interesting listen for all my listeners. So thank you again.
Thanks so much.